Alright, welcome to my channel. We're going to be tearing, or I've already torn it apart. We're going to be putting that back together a Trx4m with some new brass goodies, replacing all the transmission and differential bushings with bearings. Like you can see, I've already tore it down. That's the center brass, new center skid, transmission mount, link mount. Adds a little bit of weight to it. It is pretty heavy, a lot heavier than the factory plastic piece. So in this video I'll show you how to, here I'm tearing the transmission apart, taking the screws out. Sorry my hands are in the way, not the best recording angle. This is my first video. I've been in RCs for 25-30 years. My uncle got me into RCs back when I was 10 years old, 11 years old, so probably more like 35 years. But anyways, here I'm pulling the screws out. I believe there's 4. Like I said, my hand's in the way. My hand gets in the way a lot in this video. I try to show, hold up to the camera the stuff that's needs to be seen. But once you pull the 4 or 5 screws out that hold the transmission together, you also have to pull the screw out of each driveline yoke. I didn't do that first, but I will here in a minute, and slide them off. And here I took it apart already. I guess I've cut out some of the other stuff, but this is the main part anyway. Here's the front and rear halves with the bushings in. There's 3 bushings in the front and rear half, so 6 bushings come out, 6 bearings go back in. A couple of the bushings you can push out the output side where the drive lines hook up. You can push them out from the outside. The other 2 on each cover, you have to stick something in and work them out. A pick would probably work pretty good. I've always just used whatever I have on hand, and in a minute you'll see me pick up a bigger Allen that fits. If it fits in the hole, you don't want it where it fits in there tight, but if it fits in there where there's not a lot of wiggle room, it does make it easier to put pressure on it to work the bushings out. And once you get them worked out, get all the bushings out, match up your bearing kit. Will have multiple size bearings in it. This particular kit, the bearings came in separate bags, so that made it a lot easier to know which ones to use. But I always match up the old bushings with the new bearings, make sure the outer diameter and inner diameter is the same, because you can have a bushing or bearing that has the same outside diameter but different inside diameter. So always make sure you look at the inside diameter also. Most of the time you can tell. If there's a difference, there'll be a big enough difference you can visibly see it. But work out the bearings or bushings. Then you find the correct bearings to go back in. There's a lot of cuts in this video. This is my first video, like I said, and I cut out a bunch of the stuff that didn't need to be in the video to make it short enough where some people might watch it, hopefully. I know it is 31 minutes, but it is a full tear down of the transmission and both front and rear axles, differentials, to replace all the factory bearing bushings with bearings. And once you put the bearings in, just take a little tool and make sure they're seated in all the way. Here's the front and rear half of the transmission I'm showing on the camera with all the bearings installed. I do put the gears and all back in. I think I cut that part out because my hands were in the way. You couldn't really see what I was doing anyway. But you just put the gears back in the way they come out, and they pretty much only go one way. They won't go back together unless you got them right. Here I've got the gears back in and the housings back together, and putting the screws back in. And appreciate anybody that's watching my video and checks out my channel. There will be some more videos, and they will get better. I'm working on getting a better workspace to video. This was kind of just like a last minute thing. I was working on my Trx4m and I thought, hey, let me video this. I want to start me a channel anyway, so gotta start somewhere. But here I'm putting the screws back in, tightening them all up for the transmission. I do believe, well, I don't believe, I mount the transmission back in the chassis and then set that to the side and concentrate on the front and rear axles and differentials. That's what this video consists of, is the bearings, putting the bearings in the transmission and the front and rear differentials, axles. Here I'm putting the screw back in the yoke for the drive line. The transmission has front and rear. I think I cut one side out of the video just to shorten it up a little bit. This original teardown, complete teardown or complete rebuild, I had already torn it down, which it only took 15 minutes to rip it apart. Always takes a lot longer to put it back together, because especially when you're replacing parts and taking stuff apart, replacing bushings and bearings, bushings with bearings. But it's about once you get it all back together, spin your drive lines, make sure everything spins freely and smoothly with no catches, which that there was real smooth with the new bearings. I will tell you, it's a night and day difference from bushings to bearings on this little truck. When I got it all back together, I just run it around in the house. Here I'm mounting the transmission back to the center skid plate, and then we'll be on to the axles. But like I said, I know you don't, the video recording angle is not that great. I wasn't thinking about that a whole lot. Like I said, this was a last minute thing to decide to record this. It will help some people out. It does have some good stuff in it, and like I said, they will get better. We'll get better recording angles, better lighting. We'll have some videos coming out, be putting some videos up too, that also just some backyard bashing and some good old time jumping the X-Max and sledge. Got a friend that's got a few RCs, a Max and a sledge. We will be doing some rock crawling videos. I do plan on building a mobile rock crawling course. In the process, it's not complete yet. Here I'm putting the battery tray back in after mounting the transmission. Put the battery tray back in. You have to kind of twist the front, stick it in an angle and twist it around in the frame rails, which if you take it apart, you'll see it comes out opposite of the way it goes back in, and then 2 screws hold it down. But anyways, hopefully I'll figure out this video editing sometime and have some background music playing, so I don't have to run my mouth the whole time. But like I said, hopefully somebody enjoys this video and gets some information off of it. I know there's a lot of videos out there of different things, but maybe this one here will have something in it that some of the others don't, or something. But anyways, here we're fixing to get started on the axles. This is the rear axle. I do have brass differential covers for the front and rear axle. We'll be replacing the factory plastic diff cover. There are 4 screws that hold the diff cover on, which that's what I'm pulling out right now. And this is a voiceover, by the way. I'm sure y'all figured that out by now. Had a lot of background noise, dogs barking, kids talking. So hopefully this helps some of y'all out. But once you pull the 4 screws out of the diff cover, on the rear axle there's 2 screws on each end. Pop off your hex drives and slide the little pins out that go through the axle, then pull 2 screws out each end, which I will show here in the video. I'm spinning the ring gear, checking it out. After taking the cover off, I discovered they don't put any grease or anything in. I guess because it's plastic gears from the factory, so they don't require any grease, I guess. I do have metal gears for this particular truck. I bought at the hobby shop just in case something happened to the plastic gears. Haven't replaced them yet. Probably should be putting them back in, but don't have them with me at this particular time, or didn't have them with me at the particular time when I was doing this, and so it's getting the plastic ones back in. There's nothing wrong with them yet, but when they do fail, they will get replaced with metal gears. If you're in North Carolina in the Union County area near Indian Trail, the hobby shop that I go to a lot is Awesome RC. Probably 90% of what you'll see in the videos and what I mess with came from there. Some of the stuff that you'll see in some of the videos I've had for years and years before that hobby shop was even around. But the guys there are awesome. If you're in that area or live in this area, I'm about 45 minutes from that area, but that's the closest one to me. Here, you saw I pulled the screws out and slid the axles out. I just dropped the ring gear out and pushing the pinion out now. Here I'm pushing the bushings out of the pinion housing. There are an inner bushing and an outer bushing, and then there is a bushing on each end of the axle housing where the axle rides on. All those are getting replaced with the bearings. Like I said, with the transmission, always match your bushings up to your bearings. Make sure you're getting the right ones back in. The rear axle just has six. Have the two pinion bearings and the two ring gear carrier bearings, and then the two axle bearings. The front axle, as you'll see when I get to it, it has two extra bearings in it because of the knuckles and the CV joint on the axle. There's a bearing on each side of the knuckle that carries the stub axle. You'll see that in a little bit when I get to it. Like I said, I cut a lot out of this video. It's still 31 minutes long, but that's about as short as I could make it and get everything in for the transmission and the axles. Like I said, if I would have just done the transmission and the axles and not mounted it back in the chassis yet and done that in part 2, could have cut a little time off, but I already had the footage. That was the only way to do it. Part 2 will be the reinstalling of the axle housings, and I have a set of aluminum links I'm replacing the plastic factory links with, aluminum high clearance links. So that will be in part 2. Here I'm putting the bearings back on the center carrier. I've already put the bearings in the housing. I did that a second ago. Sorry, I was running my mouth. I'm bad about that. Any of my friends or anybody that knows me that watches this video will have no issues. They understand I run my mouth a lot, but hey, it is who I am, and that's all part of this hobby. People that I like to get out and fellowship and talk to people and enjoy the hobby. It's one reason that trying to build a mobile crawling course that I can take around to different places and set up and get more people in this area. There's no places in this area really to do the crawling unless you just go. I mean, let me rephrase. There's lots of places, but there's no places where everybody goes and can, a group of people get to go and have a good time, have a little crawling competitions and stuff like that. So maybe one day I'll have that started. Here I'm putting these screws back in the axle housing that retain the bearing that hold the axle in. Left and right sides are the same. Once you get those back in, you'll see in a minute I'll put the pins back in the axles and snap the hexes back over the axle pins. Like I said, apologize if the audio doesn't match up with everything. I'm trying to explain what I'm doing. Get everything back together. I just now spun everything, made sure everything was free. Here I'm putting the brass diff cover on. The brass diff cover does come with its own hardware because the factory cover was plastic, so the screws were a little coarse. The brass diff cover has the screws that have the right thread and pitch for the way the diff cover is threaded. There are 4 screws in it. And also, I'm not sure if I said when I was putting the transmission back in, but anywhere where you have a metal screw that screws into metal, it's always good to put a little bit of blue Loctite on it. If the screws screw into plastic, there's nothing, you don't really need Loctite. The plastic kind of holds everything together. But in the RC world, if a metal screw screws into a metal mount or housing, it's always good to put a little Loctite because they will loosen up. Especially if you're into RCs and you're into nitro stuff. Nitro has a lot of vibration and the screws will loosen up. Like I said, I've been in the hobby so long, I've done it all. Even did planes and helicopters for a little bit, but I figured out real quick that was way too rich for my blood. Or at least the way I did it. Whenever I had it, I always wound up crashing one or something. And it doesn't cost a whole lot to fix them unless you crash them real bad, but when you crash them over and over again, it can add up real fast. So I cut my losses and got out of the aircraft. Here I'm trying to get the pin picked up, go back through the axle. Those little pins especially on these little ones, those little pins can be a booger when you got big fingers. Just snap the hub back, or the hex back over the pin. When you push it on, you'll hear a little click most of the time. Sometimes you don't hear a click, but you will be able to tell when they're locked in. Here I'm doing the other side, just same process. And here we're fixing to get started on the front axle. Got to pull the screws out of the tie rod. The tie rod ties the 2 knuckles together. I'm sure most of you know that. If you're new to the hobby, you may not know, but the tie rod bar on the Trx4m is plastic factory. I am replacing it with a brass one, just to add a little bit more weight to the truck, lower down. I don't know if I've already said this in this voiceover, but in the crawling world, the more weight you can add down lowers your center of gravity, which helps in the crawling sometimes. It can hurt you sometimes, just depending on where you add it and what kind of weight you add. Hopefully what I did to this little Trx4m makes it a lot better crawling, but it doesn't matter. I just do it for fun. I'm not a competition crawler. I may get into competition crawling when I get my portable course built, if there's enough interest in it, and some people want to helped me learn about the competition crawling as far as putting on an event. Never done that, but we'll figure it out if it comes to that. I think I'm pulling the screws out right now for the factory C-hubs, or actually I mean not the knuckle, the factory plastic knuckle. Pull those screws out and the knuckle comes off and the axle comes out with it. I do have brass knuckles and brass C-hubs that will be going back on. Here I'm pulling the screws out of the factory C-hubs. And pull the C-hubs off of each end. The factory bearing bushings are in the C-hub. I will be replacing the C-hubs with the brass, so I'll be putting the bearings back in the brass C-hubs. I know my hands are in the way on this, but I'm installing the bearings into the differential housing for the pinion. I think right here I'm pulling the pin out. Yeah, I took the plastic hexes off and pulling the drive pin out to slide the stub axle out of the knuckle. Like I said, I've got brass knuckles to go back on. I'm not sure, they may call that a caster block. I'm not sure the technical name for it. I call it a steering knuckle, but everybody gets the point. Also too, when you pull the axles out of the bushings, be careful. The front axles are CVD style. They do have a pin that holds the axle to the stub axle, and what holds that pin in is when it's inside the bushing or bearing. When it's not inside, that pin can fall out, so keep in mind of that. When you take it apart, I just have them laying on the table. They're not going anywhere. When I do put it back together, one of them slides a little bit out and gives me a little trouble, but luckily it didn't fall out and I lost it because I was not paying attention at that point in time. When I was making this video, it was probably 11:30 at night. I should have stopped and went to bed, but I wanted to just finish it up. Like I said, it was 111 minutes of video from the time I started videoing to the time I put the last screw back in and wheel nut back on and got it back together. This is will be part one. There will be a part two of putting the axle housings back in the truck. I may have already said that earlier, but if I did, you're hearing it again. There, I just finished putting the ring gear back in with the bearings. Set that over to the side. Now I'm putting the bearings in the knuckle. Taking my tool, pushing the bearing in, make sure they're seated all the way. Go in a 3 or 4 point pattern, back and forth, crisscross, side to side, pushing them in. When you're putting the bearings or bushings, if you put bushings in brass or aluminum, or bearings in brass or aluminum, you have to make sure they go in straight. The metal does not give like the plastic, so if they're not straight, they can give you a hard time. So just always pay attention to that. If you're having a hard time getting them to slide in, make sure one side's not up a little higher than the other, because it doesn't take very much to make it harder. And here I'm putting the pin back in to snap the hex back on. once I get that done, put the C-hubs back on the axle housing and put everything back together. 5 more minutes of this video, a little over 5 minutes, and it'll be over with, but hopefully it's informative to someone's getting something out of it. The brass C-hubs that I'm putting back on did come with hardware. The factory screws that held the knuckles into factory C-hubs are shoulder screws. The thread is the same. They will fit the brass knuckles, but the play from the knuckle to the C-hub, there's a little bit of play up and down. I didn't like the way it did that, so I did use the hardware that came with it, because it comes with these bushings. I'm just going to call them bushing shims, because they're bushings to bushing the hole, and they're shim or spacer to fill the gap to make the knuckle fit tighter in the C-hub. So I did try to use the factory screws. Like I said, it didn't work out. I did put the bushing shims in, and everything fit real nice. Here, put a little Loctite on them, because the knuckle screws are screwing into brass now, not into plastic. Actually, I think I just was putting the diff cover on. Just noticed that. Now we're going to get to the C-hubs. Get a little ahead of myself on this voiceover, because I can't even really tell what I'm doing. That's what I'm having to explain. My big old hand's in the way. But like I said, I apologize. The videos will get better. This is a first. Hopefully a first of many. And putting the C-hub, now I'm putting the C-hubs back on the axle. There's 2 screws to hold on each side. Like I said, hopefully by the end of the week, the part 2 of this rebuild series will drop. Definitely by the end of the weekend, I'll have it edited and up. I cut this one, just an hour and a half, down to 31 minutes, so maybe I can cut the other 40 minutes down to 20 minutes maybe for the second video, second part, which will be the second video also. Well, actually, I can't say this is my first build video. I did post a video the other day. My first actual video was me crawling with this little truck here in its stock form. Just a little 1 minute quick video, but just trying out the new things. Here, once you put those bushings in, bushing shims, and put the knuckle in, put the screws in, everything fits real good. Like I said, when you're building differentials, transmissions, anything dealing with bearings and gears and stuff, before you put it back in the vehicle and turn it with your hand, make sure everything turns smoothly and freely. Especially if you're going from bearings to bushings, everything should be a lot smoother and everything a lot freer. This screw here I'm putting in, is the threads didn't feel real good, like they had a burr or something on them, so I pulled it back out to double check and make sure it wasn't, bad tap job on it, but it went in and tightened up, and I was okay with it, so it worked out. I was checking the up and down play with the bushing shims, because like I said, I tried to use the factory screws that were shoulder screws, and they had way too much play in them, way too much for my liking. They would have probably worked, but I didn't like to play up and down. I want everything to move freely, but don't want no up and down play, or as little as can be. Here I'm putting the drive pin back in the axle, I do believe, to snap the hex back on. Hey, this video is almost over, but hopefully part 2 will be edited out and up soon. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Give me a thumbs up or a like for the new channel, new video guy, or old video guy doing new videos.